Hello, friend. This is To Live the Truth, the podcast. My name is Ryan Clawson. In this show, we sit down to dive a little deeper into the concepts in my book, To Live the Truth, which you can read for free at ryantclawson.com/tolivethetruth. In each episode, we address one chapter in a sort of book club format. This week, as we're wrapping up the first half of the book, my wonderful wife Allie and I had such a great conversation that we've decided to split it into 2 episodes. So we hope you enjoy listening to this discussion on Chapter 8, Much More Precious Than of Gold That Perisheth. At the beginning of Chapter 8, there's a summary of everything that we've read so far. You want to read that?
Mm-hmm. Truth is universal, eternal, and independent. Like a tree, all components of truth are subdivided into layers, all connected through a central trunk. Much of truth is observable on the surface by its evidences or the leaves and fruit. There are certain components of truth that pertain specifically to humans, called principles. Since the degree to which we live by these principles will determine the level of peace, joy, and success we experience, we should seek to learn and live by truth. We begin by cultivating our soil through the adoption of traits that facilitate learning. These include humility and open-mindedness, confidence in the freeing power of truth, self-compassion, curiosity, patience, and prayerfulness. Since bits of truth have been imparted to men, women, and children throughout history, we should surround ourselves with idea-inspiring, living influences such as living books and other living media, recreation, and social interactions. Ideas from these living influences will enter our hearts and minds. They act as witnesses and serve as potential seeds upon which we may experiment to determine if they are in fact components of truth. This experiment is conducted by planting the seed in our hearts. We are to exercise a particle of faith in the idea, meaning we begin to act as if it were true, with a sincere inclination to believe, rather than a passive leaning towards skepticism. Then, using observation and reason, we discern any signs or witnesses that appear. Has believing and acting on this seed begun to enlarge my soul, enlighten my understanding, and be delicious to me? Based on the results of this experiment, we can determine whether the idea we tested is closely aligned with truth. If it is not, we must cast away the idea and cease to live by it. If it is, our responsibility is to nourish it, continuing to live by it, guarding against the dying away of the first thrill in the short term, and resisting the countless distractions that will arise over the long term. In doing so, by and by ye shall pluck the fruit thereof, which is most precious.
Thank you. So, that's essentially a sum up of everything that we've discussed in this first half of the book regarding how to discern and live by truth. And at the end of this, I try to make clear that it is a lifelong process, that faith cycle is to be repeated over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And I particularly just love this quote from T.S. Eliot: "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." And I really feel like that is a great description of the kind of experience that I've had with the faith cycle throughout learning, just arriving back at certain truths that I've already learned in the past, but seeing them in a new light and just in a richer, deeper form. And I really think that that's kind of the key to this whole thing. Is this journey is about refining our beliefs and our character and our worldview. And so, like in that example I give a couple chapters back of the walk to the library where we ask for directions from a stranger, those initial directions or truth claims that we find rarely approximate pure truth, but they get us moving in the right direction, and we have to continue to work refining those ideas and those directions.
I think it's important, like you said, it impossible for our lives to resemble the tree of truth during this lifetime. So like if you're feeling content or like you've reached the top of the mountain, then I think that that's a sure sign that you have a lot of work to do, because none of us have reached the top. None of us we haven't fully resembled the perfect tree of truth. So there's so much more work to be done, I feel like. And you say right here, the work is never finished. There is always room for improvement. As Nephi warned, woe be unto him that is at ease in Zion. It's good to feel like you're making progress and you feel good about your life, but it's not good to feel like you've made it.
Right.
And that you can just stop and keep status quo. Because like you could be in a really good position, but really the only good position to be in is climbing. Doesn't matter how high you are. If you're just stopped there or just like plateauing, it's really not a good position to be in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that there's a better word than content, because I do believe that the process does invite contentment.
Right. That's
but
true.
Not complacency. Right. And it's kind of a paradox, which I feel is maybe best embodied in the phrase, I am perfect the way I am, and there is room for improvement. I think it really relates to like self-compassion, this recognition that everything in the past has led to me being where I am in this moment. All the mistakes, all the good choices, they've all worked together to bring me to this moment. And so I should be content and proud and happy with how far I've come, even if it's not very far.
Yeah.
But then recognize that in this moment, I have the responsibility to do something, to progress, to continue that journey. So yeah, for sure, woe unto him that is at ease, that is complacent, that has
stopped.
Yeah, imagine that they've completed the journey. Right.
Yeah, and I guess that's what I wanted to emphasize by just saying that none of us will be able to complete the journey, and that shouldn't be discouraging because there is joy in the journey. You know, like we've talked about, that the whole journey should be a joyful thing, and God created it to be that way. He doesn't intend for us to just have it figured out at the beginning. He wants us to experience the joy in the journey and the learning experience and the discovering and uncovering truth and, you know, learning by aligning more closely to him and to his truth.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to quickly just mention the footnote on page 98 here, because I don't mention it in the audiobook. So if somebody's listened to the audiobook, they've missed this. And I think it's important to mention this. I say, you may wonder if shaping our personal trees to more closely resemble the tree of truth will restrict or suppress your identity, forcing you to conform to a predetermined mold. If everyone began emulating the tree of truth perfectly, wouldn't all of our lives look exactly the same? On the contrary, remember that wisdom is justified of all her children. That's a quote from Luke that I mentioned in chapter 3. Perhaps each of our individual trunks and branches would look the same, but an infinite variety of leaves can grow and thrive from those living limbs. Given our diverse interests, personalities, and circumstances, absolute truth can and will manifest in endless variety. Embracing and adopting profound truths will only enhance and augment your individuality and uniqueness, not limit it. And I believe that to be really just profoundly true. And the funny thing is that it's kind of the opposite. The more that we rebel and distance ourselves from the trunk, the more cookie cutter we become, the more similar to everybody else we become. Really, true uniqueness and individuality and that blossoming of the soul can really only occur as we draw closer to truth.
God didn't create these truths to overshadow us or for us to just be mindless subjects underneath him, underneath all this truth. You know what I mean? He created them to lift each of us up to our highest potential. which is just a cool idea.
There's a few final clarifying points here. One of them being you cannot invent profound truth. The basic principle here is that we are not inventing truth. We're not creating personal values that work for us. We are working to discover, to uncover truth that has always been there, that is eternal, and then apply it more accurately in our lives. So the invitation is to, rather than becoming kind of swept up and excited by new ideologies that people may have created to fit modern living, it might be a better starting point to just evaluate truths that have been around for a long time, or at least that people have claimed to be true.
Yeah. That's why we love reading classic literature, because I feel like most of those books will have similar themes or ideas or values in them, and you can still relate to them today. And so you know that these are possible truths that have stood the test of time.
Yeah, that is definitely one reason why we read classic literature. And I like to read things from a variety of cultural backgrounds as well, because it's interesting when you find patterns that appear in seemingly completely unrelated sources. To me, that's a big indicator that this may be something to pay attention to. You know, for example, I've been reading a little bit of Confucius recently, and he talks about the danger of profit and seeking riches. I mean, he's got a Chinese background, largely divorced from our Western civilization, and yet that same theme appears in the Bible. And so I feel like that's something to indicate to me that there is a universal truth to be uncovered there. The next point that I bring up is a Yoda quote, "You must unlearn what you have learned." And this is again to introduce that much of this journey of learning may really be the practice of letting go of certain beliefs that you've held for a long time that aren't accurate. It may be the thing that's holding you back from progressing and reaching greater levels of peace and joy and success is not something that you haven't found yet. It's something that you have been clinging to that is weighing you down. And I've certainly found that to be true for me. There are cultural ideologies that have been handed down or that have appeared just in the last few generations that are just simply not very closely aligned with reality, that could be holding you back and preventing you from more closely aligning with truth.
I just love the quote from Joshua Fields Milburn. It says, "The path to misery is cobbled with addition. The path to peace is uncovered with subtraction." I just feel like both physically and mentally, when you can subtract and simplify, it creates more space to focus on what's true and beautiful and fulfilling.
Absolutely. And that may be a topic for another day, because it's one that I treasure quite a bit, and I could talk about a lot. But yeah, when it comes to peace, I believe that peace is the default state of man. And that is likely one of those cultural beliefs that needs to be let go, is that assumption that peace and joy must be chased after. It must be pursued. That we've got to find something that's out there that once we add that to our lives, that's when peace can come. And that's silly, because I believe peace is like silence, in that you don't find silence by turning up the volume. You don't add noise to bring that silence in. You've got to take away, you've got to turn that volume down. You've got to eliminate the things that are covering the peace that's already present in your soul. Right? Anyway, that's a whole
really
other.
Good. You said peace is the
default
state.
I can't claim that. I think that's actually from Joshua Fields Milburn. I can't find it anywhere. I don't know where I heard it from him, But anyway, yeah.
That's cool.
Pretty sure it's him. But anyway, those things that we need to let go that will welcome that peace into our lives, they often die hard. They come back with a vengeance, even when you think you've eliminated or taken care of a certain limiting belief. It can reappear silently and surprisingly later on. And so I introduce a tool which has worked for me in combating that tendency, which is affirmations, which are basically just repeated statements that you repeat to yourself on a regular basis to remind you of what's important and to try to keep those values and those truth statements present in your consciousness on a regular basis, right?
I was thinking about that story of the teachers that are told which students were gifted. So I looked it up, and it says that there's a phenomenon known as the Pygmalion effect, or self-fulfilling prophecy, where higher teacher expectations lead to improved student performance. Researchers found that when teachers were told randomly selected students were gifted, those students showed greater academic growth and higher engagement. And so I feel like affirmations are kind of like us putting those higher expectations on ourselves.
So the teacher's beliefs influenced the way they treated those children and the manner in which they gave them attention and care throughout the school year, right? And that was reflected in the children's actual performance. So I've heard the reason given. And in fact, the first thing that actually turned me on to affirmations, which I now have kind of sidelined for what I believe is a higher perception of affirmations, was this argument that we think, 10,000 thoughts a day or something like that. And the vast majority of them are negative, are self-deprecating. Stuff like, oh, I should have done better. Oh, that was stupid of me. Stuff like that, right? And those are lies. They're not true. They're exaggerated at very least, right? And so the argument goes, if you're going to be thinking all these thoughts anyway, all these lies, you might as well make them good lies, positive lies. So repeat to yourself good lies, right? Lies that will embolden you and empower you, right? So I see that argument. I think that's good. And I think that ties in with what you're talking about. That even though these students were actually, some of them were low performers, were troubled children, because the teachers actually believed they were gifted kids, they gave them the attention that changed the reality, right? So you can kind of shape your own reality by telling yourself these lies, right? I see that. I don't love it. I think it got me started. It got me into affirmations at first because I was like, yeah, I see the logic of that. If I'm lying to myself anyway, I might as well replace the negative lies with some positive ones. Now, a lot of people suggest that your affirmations can be targeted at your outward circumstances. Something like, I am a millionaire, or I think of like vision boards where they've got pictures of them driving a Ferrari and living on the beach and stuff. And I can see, like, on a psychological level that could do something. But I make the argument here, my one piece of counsel is use affirmations primarily to refine and strengthen the trunk and branches of your personal tree. So saying something like, I am a millionaire, that doesn't shape your beliefs, at least not as I define them in this book. Your core beliefs, your true values. Saying those kind of affirmations doesn't touch that at all. It might, keep this dream in front of your mind of becoming a millionaire. And there's a lot to unpack there of, like, number one, maybe being a millionaire would be the absolute worst thing to happen to you.
Right.
So maybe that affirmation would work and it would lead you to riches. But especially if it leaves your character and your soul untouched, it very well could be the absolute worst thing to happen to you. And we can explore that a little more in chapter 13, where I talk about the deceitfulness of riches. But the point is, for me, I've found affirmations to be most useful when I use them primarily to attack my limiting beliefs and to try and sustain certain truth claims that I believe are true and yet am finding challenging to consistently live by. Right? So an example that I would give is really an affirmation that has stayed in my affirmation statements from basically the beginning of me trying this. And it's been several years now, but some book presented the idea to me, or at least made me aware that I had forgotten or neglected a fundamental truth, which is that I have the freedom to choose. And we'll talk about this more in chapter 10, because it's one of my core beliefs that I include in this book. I realized that I had fallen for the victim mindset a little bit. And so, among other affirmations, I included this phrase, which went something like, I am responsible for and in control of my emotions, thoughts, and actions. I've tweaked it a little bit over the years in order to keep it fresh, because sometimes a phrase repeated over and over again becomes stale and you kind of become blind to it. But I often kind of come back to that core phrase, and it really has never left. It's still one of my affirmations, just because I feel it's so powerful and important. And I also feel like it's so easy, especially in modern society, to let external influences blur that principle and make me forget that it's true. So again, that's not me talking about how much money I have or whether I have a gladiator body or something. It's addressing a core belief in my soul. And it has been very influential for me.
Yeah, your affirmations may lead you to getting into better shape or to getting your $1 million or whatever it is. But are you just painting leaves on a dead tree? Because if that's the case, it will not bring you happiness. And that's what you're searching for when you are wanting those things. You're searching for happiness and success. And we know, like, you've got to just trust that happiness and success only come when we have a healthy tree, healthy trunk, healthy branches, healthy roots.
Yeah. Samuel Johnson wrote, "He who hath so little knowledge of human nature as to seek happiness by changing anything but his own disposition will waste his life in fruitless efforts and multiply the grief he proposes to remove." The key to joy and true lasting peace and success is to change your own disposition, to change your own character. And no amount of riches or enormous houses or success as it's measured by the world will make up for a sick and underdeveloped character.
Maybe we could just add this quote from you. It says, as we align more closely to the tree of truth, we can expect levels of peace, success, and fulfillment that once seemed beyond our grasp to not only be realized, but even to gravitate toward us naturally, with little to no effort. Such is the reward of fearlessly endeavoring to live the truth. So I just think that that's important, that we need to have a mindset shift, that is actually where we will find the happiness, like you were saying. It'll gravitate toward us naturally as we focus on the trunk and our character.
Thank you for listening. We invite you to join us next episode for the second half of this conversation, in which we put in practice what we've learned so far, submitting some ideas that we've recently encountered to the faith cycle.